I'm an old man now, I'm 65, so I've been around for a long time. Back in the 1970s, I was a journalist, and my interest at that time was entirely in current affairs. I had no interest in the past at all. I was the East Africa correspondent for The Economist in the early 1980s. I was based in Nairobi in Kenya. My beat as their correspondent took me frequently to Ethiopia, which was very much in the news in those days. And in Ethiopia, I came across an incredible story. Ethiopia claims to possess the lost Ark of the Covenant, as in Raiders of the Lost Ark, which in the early 1980s, as it happened, I had just seen. So I found myself in front of this monk in a city called Aksum in northern Ethiopia, then in the midst of a war zone. And he's telling me that behind him in this chapel is the Ark of the Covenant. And part of me is thinking, come on. And part of me is thinking, there's a story here. And I started to follow that story. I was told by academics there was nothing to it, but at the same time I could see that this idea that the Ark of the Covenant was in Ethiopia was central to Ethiopian culture, was central to the ancient form of Christianity practiced in Ethiopia, and was central to the religion of the Ethiopian Jews as well, the people who call themselves Beta Israel, or the House of Israel, who practice a very Old Testament form of Judaism. So I started to think, the academics are telling me there's nothing to this, but I think there is something to it. The truth on the ground is much different from what the scholars are saying. And I began to investigate it very, very closely. And that investigation drew me in two directions. It drew me into the ancient past and the mysteries of the past. And it made me realize that everything scholars say is not necessarily true, that they are often expressing their prejudices rather than really researched work. So it was that was my initiation into the past. It was a process. To write that book, I also needed to travel to Egypt, and I found myself in front of the Great Pyramid for the first time. It had an extraordinary effect on me. I began to look into the details of it, the statistics, the precision of the structure. And again, I looked at what the academics were saying, and it sounded like utter rubbish to me. So I felt there's a place for further investigation here, and that eventually led on to my best-known book, which is Fingerprints of the Gods, that was published in 1995. By that time, I was fully drawn in to the mystery and magic of the past and completely separated from current affairs. And I've continued that relationship with the past. I think that's where we need to disentangle the truth most urgently, because if we've got our past wrong, then that's part of why we've got our present wrong as well. Well, how did communities and civilizations begin to form is a question that takes us back to the roots of human experience. Humans are naturally social animals. We live in groups. None of us really have the resources as individuals to function and survive in the world. We have those resources as a community. And I think you can trace the human story as far back as you can possibly trace it, and you're going to find that community is part of it. And for a very long time, those communities were communities of hunter-gatherers. And it's interesting, if you go back to the Upper Paleolithic, that we find almost no evidence for warfare. We find almost no evidence for the greedy acquisition of material goods, rather a living in harmony with nature and a living off the land, but living as a community, small communities which are self-sufficient, which interrelate with other communities, but which do not make war upon them. There's no sign of that. Something else enters the human story in the period that academics call the Neolithic, when we get supposedly, and I think this whole history needs to be looked at very, very carefully, but when we get supposedly the first agricultural communities that are, unlike hunter-gatherer communities, these agricultural communities are generating surpluses. Those surpluses allow specialist skills to emerge. Astronomers, priests, architects, designers can suddenly be supported by the community and can exercise their skills in the benefit of the community. That sounds like a really good thing, but it's unfortunately in the Neolithic, exactly when that begins to happen, that we get the evidence for warfare, for one community seeking to dominate and control another. And I think what a long look at the past says is that that is not inevitable to the human condition. We don't have to go that way. We can live in organized societies. We can benefit from large communities pooling their intelligence and their skills. We can benefit from all of that without becoming destructive and murderous. It's a matter of waking up and making the choice. Why did communities create temples? The temple is something that is associated with organized hierarchical religion. You do not get temples in hunter-gatherer societies. In a sense, their temple is the universe. Their temple is the sacred Mother Earth and the sacred Father Sky. Those are the temples of hunter-gatherer communities. They don't need to build structures to perhaps amplify experience. They are already connected to the fundamental basis of all experience. What you get as societies become more organized and more hierarchical is you get the spiritual experience being channeled through some kind of religious structure. And that is not necessarily a bad thing. If you look at ancient Egypt, really, which is a culture that actually enshrines many of the values of hunter-gatherer societies, much more than many academics would realize. It was also a hierarchical and organized society. They understood something about sky and ground, about as above, so below. They understood how to create sacred spaces in which the human experience of mystery and of the divine could be amplified. And these sacred spaces include the great temples of Upper Egypt, the Temple of Horus at Edfu, for example, the Temple of Seti I at Abydos in Upper Egypt. These are amazing places. The moment that you enter them, you can feel that something's working on your consciousness. Even today, thousands of years after they were decommissioned, after they ceased to be part of a functioning society, they still reach out to us and touch us at an extremely deep level. The Great Pyramid is the classic example of that. The lie told by archaeologists is that the Great Pyramid was the tomb of some megalomaniac pharaoh. It's been clear to me for a very long time that the Great Pyramid was never a tomb. The Great Pyramid was a giant instrument for amplifying human consciousness, and it functions as a beacon. It still functions as a beacon. It draws people towards it from all over the world. They don't even know why they're drawn towards it. It selects its own initiates. For some people, it's just a heap of stones. For others, it's a sacred mystery. And those are the ones that the Great Pyramid speaks to, and it was designed to do that. So, although the creation of temples and sacred architecture is the work of organized hierarchical societies, we have the example particularly of ancient Egypt, which tells us that that work can be good. It can touch the human soul in a wonderful, thought out, beautiful way. It's not an accident. The historian Herodotus visited Egypt in the 4th or 5th century before Christ, and Herodotus reported that the Egyptians were the happiest people that he had ever encountered anywhere on earth. And this is a civilization that devoted its best minds for 3,000 years to considering the mystery of life and death and the mystery of existence, and found a beautiful way to function in the world. Unfortunately, as time goes on, you get a new force coming into the world, and those are the monotheistic religions, Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, which rapidly ceased to be about direct spiritual contact. Those sacred temples of Egypt were not about enhancing the power of the priesthood. They were about giving individuals the additional support to access mystery. What we have in the big monotheistic faiths is something very different. We have the priests and the rabbis and the mullahs who are imposing themselves between us and the divine. We are to only experience the divine with their permission, their way. through their system and no other way. And this then ceases to be something that serves the human spirit, and it becomes something that's part of the system of control in our society. So what I observe is that sacred spaces and temples have become denaturized as time has gone on. They've become a home of bureaucracy rather than a home of spiritual experience. How do I think the pyramids were built? To be honest, I have no answer to that question. And anybody who tells you that he or she knows how the pyramids were built are not telling the truth, because we don't know. We don't know. The Great Pyramid contains a number of mysteries. The Great Pyramid, first of all, is very big. The Great Pyramid weighs 6 million tons. We can calculate that from its mass. It weighs 6 million tons. Its footprint is 13 acres. It's more than 750 feet along each side. It's 481 feet tall. More than 2.5 million individual blocks of stone were used in its construction. But it's not just big, it's really, really precise. The Great Pyramid is locked in to the cardinal dimensions of our planet. The Great Pyramid is targeted on true north within 3/60ths of a single degree. Now, no modern builder would create a large building and add onto his or her shoulders the additional burden of aligning it to true north within a fraction of a single degree. They just wouldn't get it. They wouldn't understand why it was important to do that. But something drove the builders of the Great Pyramid to go to a very great additional trouble, not only to create this massive, imposing monument, but also to lock it on to true north, and then other things, to incorporate into its dimensions the dimensions of our planet. I don't want to get too numerical or possibly even boring here, but if you take the height of the Great Pyramid and multiply it by 43,200, you get the polar radius of the Earth. And if you measure the base perimeter of the Great Pyramid accurately and multiply that measurement by 43,200, you get the equatorial circumference of the Earth. In other words, for thousands of years, through times, through dark ages, when human beings didn't even know they lived on a planet, never mind its dimensions, that monument has encoded and speaks out the dimensions of our planet on a scale of 1 to 43,200. And the scale is not random. The number 43,200 is derived from a key motion of the Earth, which is called the precession of the Earth's axis. The Earth wobbles on its axis very slowly at the rate of 1 degree every 72 years. And 43,200 is a multiple of 72. In fact, I think it's 600 times 72, but I need to double check that. But it's a multiple of 72. Check it out. So they've given us the dimensions of our planet on a scale defined by the planet itself. And that's an incredibly clever thing to do. How on earth did they do it? Where did that knowledge come from? This is why I'm forced to consider the possibility of a lost civilization in the human story. This is a work of almost, but not quite, space-age precision. It contains errors, but they are human errors for sure, but they're very tiny. The great precision, great skill, great craft. Some people will say to you, oh, the Great Pyramid was built by slaves. That is utter bullshit. No slaves were ever involved in the construction of the Great Pyramid. As far as I know, there were no slaves in Old Kingdom Egypt whatsoever. The Great Pyramid, I've climbed it 5 times. I've been in every known chamber in the Great Pyramid. It is a work of stunning artistic achievement. You're looking at the work of masters of architecture at the peak of their skill. Not an unwilling labor force, but people who gave their labor to that work with love and with care and with attention. There are blocks of stone weighing 70 tons that have been raised more than 300 feet above the ground. And we're not talking a couple of blocks, we're talking dozens of blocks of that weight. The average block weighs about 2.5 tons. It's the moving of those huge blocks of stone, their arrangement into a high precision monument, and the achievement of actually doing it, because you know, if you make a small mistake at the base, by the time you get to the summit of your 480 1-foot-high pyramid, you don't have a pyramid, you have a corkscrew. You know? They got it all right, and nobody today can explain how they did it, with the knowledge that is supposed to have been available in ancient Egypt, in the Old Kingdom, and with the tools that are supposed to have been available. And that's why I can't help feeling that we are missing some chapter from the human story. Do I think music is a global impulse? Absolutely yes. Music is fundamental to the human creature. We are connected to music, through music, with music, in extraordinary and deep ways. It is not an accident, for example, that music, the songs that are called Icaros, are used in ayahuasca ceremonies in the Amazon. They're not a sideline. The singing of those songs is central to the ayahuasca ceremony and to the ayahuasca experience. And when you're in the grip of the brew, in a deep visionary state, those songs become roads. They become pathways. They materialize. You can see them. And you find yourself following them. They're leading you in the direction of the experience you need. And they're a central part of it. I think music alone is capable of bringing about altered states of consciousness if we engage with it properly, capable of touching us in our emotional centers in the way that almost nothing else is. I think music is a sacred exercise for humanity, and perhaps we need to recover that notion a little bit and to sacralize music again. I don't really know of any ancient civilization which achieved a high level of functioning which didn't use psychedelics. Psychedelics were astonishingly widely used in the ancient world, and used very carefully, with great attention being paid to what we now call set and setting. So, for example, you can go to Chavin de Huantar, about 200 miles north of Lima, turn right, drive up into the Andes, 14,000 feet, drop down into the Chavin Valley, and you'll find yourself in an ancient archaeological site, the largest part of which are galleries below the ground, which were used in ceremony in ancient times, and that ceremony involved the San Pedro cactus. It involved, in which mescaline is the active ingredient. When the conquistadors came there, they couldn't understand what all this was about. Why had they created these great galleries? What was going on? We now know what was going on. They were creating a setting that would maximize the effect of the psychedelic of choice, which in their case was the San Pedro cactus. If you go to Eleusis in ancient Greece, it's a ruin now outside of Athens. But for more than 2,000 years, until the 4th century after Christ, Eleusis was the beating heart of the ancient Greek world. And again, like Chavin de Huantar, it turns out that there are enormous underground galleries, darkened spaces, which they called the telestrion. We now know what was going on there. The initiates in the Eleusinian mysteries came and drank a brew before they went down into the telestrion. That brew essentially was LSD. It was a non-poisonous form of ergot growing on barley, which they then harvested and cooked up in the brew called the kykeon. So no wonder when people went down into the telestrion, into those darkened spaces which were subtly lit here and there, that they would have life-transforming experiences. Plato was an initiate, Sophocles was an initiate, Cicero was an initiate, Pindar was an initiate. They all said that the experience they had had in the telestrion after drinking the brew was life-changing. They lost utterly their fear of death. They knew that death was not the end, but just the beginning of the next great adventure. And those spaces were the heart of everything that was good and worthy and worthwhile about ancient Greek culture. And it's a comment upon the way that civilization has gone, that it was fanatical early Christianity that destroyed Eleusis and that put an end to those rites that had been so life-affirming and so life-enhancing for so long. And this is true, frankly, all around the world, whether you go to ancient India, whether you go to ancient Mexico, of course to ancient South America. In South America, we have a whole pyramid city called Caral, which has only been excavated in the last 15 years. And you know, archaeologists went to it with their prejudices. Nobody could have created a huge place like this unless they were highly domineering and hierarchical and making war on others. Turns out there's no evidence of warfare whatsoever at Caral. But what there is evidence of is the massive use of hallucinogenic snuffs from the Amazon. So this great culture that built the largest pyramids ever created in the New World, pyramids that are 5,000 years old, this great culture was founded upon and based upon the import of hallucinogenic snuffs from the Amazon and the free interrelation of peoples without any warfare. You can find this all around the world. Psychedelics have been central to human culture from the very beginning. And I think that goes right back to the Stone Age, to the Upper Paleolithic. There's a moment when a light seems to go on in our ancestors' heads all around the world. And they start producing art that is definitive of visionary experiences. They are depicting visionary experiences. And that's the moment that we get this huge step forward in the evolution of human behavior. We're already anatomically modern, but the software wasn't there. It looks like it was psychedelics that provided the software, that brought about modern human consciousness. We are now in a process of reversion from that. We need to correct that course. We need to return to the course of expanded consciousness, of dissolved boundaries, of openness to the universe, and to the spirit of love and nurture, which is fundamental to the human experience. Look, we're creatures of this planet. We are bound into the rhythms of this planet, and the ultimate, obvious, immediate, present rhythm is the rhythm of day and night. That for some hours, the side of the planet we're sitting on faces the sun, and as it revolves, it then faces darkness. So we have night and day, and it's part of all our biorhythms. I mean, you try and ignore night and day for too long, and you'll find that it has a very disturbing effect on your psyche. So I think we should never forget that we're creatures of the earth. We are part of this sacred realm, this gorgeous, beautiful garden of a planet. You know, this blue, lush, wondrous, beautiful planet that is floating like a bubble in space and preserving life. So of course we're part of the planet. We're not aliens here. We belong here. We emerged from this planet. We are, in a way, an important part of the consciousness of this planet. I'm not saying we're the only part. Consciousness is everywhere, but we're an important part of it. And because we have made ourselves so powerful, almost to the point where humanity has become a geological force, our consciousness and our behavior is a really important matter to consider if we're considering the future of the planet. So we should never forget, this planet is our home. We emerged from it. And this is, in my view, not an accidental process. It's a part of the whole universe coming awake. We are locked into the rhythms of this planet, whether it's night and day, whether it's the annual course of the Earth around the sun, which gives us the seasons. Beautifully and amazingly, the Earth is tilted on its axis at an angle of 23.5 degrees. For that reason, we have seasons. If the Earth was perfectly upright on its axis, we would not have seasons. But we have seasons because of the tilt. It's almost as though the universe conspired to create a beautiful home for life. It's almost like it was a project to create a place where life could flourish, where consciousness could grow and consciousness could develop. We need to remember that we're part of the Earth, we're part of the consciousness of the Earth, but we also need to remember that other forces are at work which seek to shut human consciousness down. And part of our duty and part of our responsibility as creatures of the Earth is to resist those forces that shut down our consciousness, because it's the Earth that has given us our consciousness. So In order to answer that question, I need to refer you to an ancient body of ideas. And that ancient body of ideas is called Gnosticism. Gnosticism means knowledge, but the Gnostics were not talking about the kind of knowledge you get from reading books or that you study in school or in university. They were talking about revelation, about revealed knowledge, which comes through experience and can come in an instant. Psychedelics, as a matter of fact, are one of the effective ways of reintroducing us to gnosis. No longer do we count on the expert to tell us what we're experiencing or what the experience means. We have the experience ourselves, and that experience is transformatory. Now, the Gnostics believed, and I'm simply reporting to you their belief, that we live in a friend of mine actually calls this world a university of duality. He's touching on Gnostic ideas there, because the Gnostics believed that the fundamental character of this level of existence is duality, that there is dark and light, that there is good and evil, and that good and evil are not simple social constructs, that they are fundamental to the essence of life at this level of existence. It doesn't mean that there isn't unity beyond that, but that at this level of existence, we have something to learn from duality. Duality forces us to make choices. We don't think about it a lot, but actually every minute of every day, we are making choices, sometimes very small, sometimes very large, between good and evil. We are making choices about how we live in the world, about how we function, about how we relate to others. And the Gnostics saw this as a teaching and a learning process. Part of that learning process is that there is a force at work in the universe which seeks to snuff out the divine spark in humanity, which seeks to deny the growth of our consciousness. That's an unfortunate side of dualism. They called this force the demiurge. And they said that the demiurge had evil angels working for him, who they called archons. And those evil angels, they worked to limit and suppress and destroy human consciousness. And the project of Gnosticism was to bring illumination, for us to understand, to realize what our true condition is, and why it's extremely important that we make choices for good rather than for evil. The essential notion of Gnosticism is that there are forces at work impacting upon us which are good and nurturing and beautiful and true, and there are other forces at work impacting upon us which are evil and deadly and destructive and dangerous. And our position, our situations as human beings, is that we must choose between the two. The demiurgic forces are clever. They work to limit human choice. They work to persuade us that there is no choice to make. And that's why I think that we find ourselves in this situation where we are confronted by evil all the time, sometimes on a very grand scale, a global scale. To me, it seems obvious that some kind of evil is at work when we can have so much wealth in Western cultures, so much prosperity, and yet close our minds and eyes to the fact that half the human race is living in a state of desperate deprivation, where every day is a struggle for existence, where they have no time to do anything else except to struggle to keep body and soul together for another day. We have political forces at work in our society which seek to persuade us that warfare is right, that we should go and make war on other peoples because they disagree with us on some idea or another. The Gnostics would have understood that immediately as the demiurge at work, misguiding us, seeking to divorce us from our true essential selves. The same goes for big corporations, you know, and for the so-called nanny state, the state which seeks to deprive us of all responsibility, to make choices for us. That's why I would say that we live in a time of extraordinary importance right now. As far as we know, it's the first time that there's been a global human conversation going on. And that global human conversation is going on because of the internet. The internet has, you'd be surprised how far it reaches. Even in the middle of the Amazon jungle, people are on the net, you know, and they're hearing what's happening elsewhere in the world. And truly we are in a global human conversation. And that's why right now, the choices that we make as a species for good or for evil have vast importance, hugely magnified beyond the implications of those choices a couple of thousand years ago. It is actually possible for us to, and it may happen because the forces of death and destruction are very strong in our society. We may end up sterilizing the earth, destroying this beautiful planet. It's possible that we can do that, but we don't have to do it. We have the choice. We can always, each day, in each instant, make the choice for good rather than for evil. I think those are real choices. I think they matter, and I think they're part of the nature of life at this level of existence. As I say, I don't think that's all there is. The Gnostics didn't think that's all there is either. There's something beyond that, but we are here to learn, and we will be defined by our choices, and ultimately the responsibility is ours. Do I think that ancient civilizations suffered from addiction? No, I don't think so. I don't think that was a problem. There's a big mistake we make in our society with the issue of addiction. Right away, the view is that it's the substance that you get addicted to. It's not the case. The addiction is always an issue within the person who is addicted, and we all have the capacity to become addicted to something which we feel serves us in a certain way. Which makes us somehow feel good, you know. But that is our problem. It's not a problem of the activity or the substance that we're taking. And I rather strongly believe that in the ancient world, societies were more adjusted, more balanced, were capable of providing a support system for fellow human beings, which our society does not do. So I think the problems of addiction, whether it's addiction to gambling, addiction to sex, addiction to heroin, addiction to pharmaceutical drugs, whatever it is, this is a problem that will not be solved at the level of substance. This is a problem that will be solved at the level of the person. And in order to solve it, we need a nurturing and loving society, not a society that seems to, I mean, look at what happens with heroin addicts in our society now. What do? They give them methadone, you know. I mean, what is that for? What's that all about? Just, you're not curing an addiction, you're just addicting the person to another drug. It makes no sense whatsoever. When there are liberating instruments like ayahuasca, which can lead to personal revelation that end the addiction often overnight without any further trouble. So it's rightly said that ayahuasca is like 20 years of psychotherapy in one night. Yeah. So the question is, where does soul come from, and where do I think it goes when the body dies? This is my belief system. I can't prove this, but I feel that the what we call the soul, that is the fundamental of the human being. That is, it's not our bodies, it's not our digestive system or our brains or our skeleton. It's the soul, and the soul is non-physical. I believe the fundamental essence of consciousness is non-physical. I think consciousness is one of the basic forces of the universe, to be ranked alongside gravity and electromagnetism. It's a fundamental force of the universe. And again, I can only tell you my own belief system. I think that this physical realm was created by non-physical consciousness. I think it's a place in which non-physical consciousness can manifest in the physical experience, and can live a life where there are physical consequences, where choices have to be made. In other words, the physical realm is a place where souls learn to grow and develop, and they do that by incarnating in physical bodies, not necessarily only human bodies. Let's not pretend that animals are not also souls. Of course a dolphin is a soul. Of course a fruit fly is a soul, even though it has a limited time here. There's a limited experience to be undergone which can help it to grow. I think that's what's going on in the physical world. I think that it's a place of learning and development of the soul. So where do souls come from? They are always there. They are the essence of the universe. Where do they go to when physical life ends? Back to the place where they came from, which is not a place, which is everywhere, which is everything. But it's everywhere where it's not possible to have the learning experience of being incarnated in a physical body. I happen to think we come back. I think this incredible opportunity of a human life would be rather wasteful if it were only one life that we had. I think we come back for many lives, and the cards are randomly dealt. We may come back in the next life with a totally different stack of cards from the ones we came into in this life. And that's good, because that's how we learn, that's how we grow. But the deal with reincarnation is you must forget your former life. If you remembered it, if you knew the rules of the game, you would no longer be able to play the game straight. So that's why the ancient Greeks said that we drink the waters of forgetfulness.
Unless you came back as something else, non-human form.
Unless you came
back as something in a non-human form, as an animal or a...
Well, you might well come back in an animal form, and who knows, there might be a great deal to learn from life as a wolf or life as a sheep. It is possible, and let's not forget that also there is likely to be life on other planets in this vast universe. Who's to say that reincarnation simply brings us back to the Earth and to human bodies? Maybe we come back on other planets in totally other bodies altogether. In short, I think that the entire universe is a theater of experience for the soul. It's a vast enterprise that involved the creation of a material realm and a level of existence where the vibration is lower than it is at the level of non-physical consciousness. And we come down into that physical level of existence. We learn the lessons here, we make our mistakes, and we carry on until perhaps we reach some kind of resolution. We reach a point where we're ready to move on to the next level. That's how I see it. I can't prove it. Maybe it's not so, but it makes sense to me. Holotropic breath work, for example. So you're asking me if the profoundly altered states of consciousness that we reach through the use of psychedelics can be reached in other ways, and you're giving the specific example of breath work. Yeah. Well, yes, actually. Psychedelics are not the only way to enter deeply altered states of consciousness that can be life transforming. It's the altered state of consciousness that really matters, and there are really quite a lot of ways of reaching it. In fact, nature seems to have taken what used to be called a belt and braces approach to this. It's provided us with lots of ways to be sure that we do access altered states of consciousness. One of the things that suggests to me that altered states of consciousness are a fundamental part of the human birthright, and that any society that seeks to demonize those states of consciousness is making a very radical mistake. For example, the San Bushmen of southern Africa, the Kalahari Bushmen in Namibia, they entered deeply altered states of consciousness and communicate with entities and travel through the sky and can spot herds of game at distances of hundreds of miles by doing that, not by taking a psychedelic, but by doing a dance around a fire, a dance, they call it the trance dance. It can last 24 hours. Wow. The shaman becomes completely bathed in sweat. He enters a deeply altered, then he'll take his sweat and wipe it on another person, and the trance passes to that other person instantly. It's a really extraordinary thing. No medicines, no plants are used, entirely dance. And perhaps the dehydration that comes with the dance and brings about those changes in the brain that lead to a deeply altered state of consciousness without the use of any plants. I know that Stanislav Grof developed holotropic breathwork after he was stopped using LSD. His practice was with LSD, psychotherapy with LSD. When that was made illegal, he developed breathwork as another way of accessing those states. I'm not sure that everybody can get into those states using breath work or using the trance dance or using meditation or fasting for 4 weeks. You know, there are many ways to get into those states, but not everybody can access a deeply altered state of consciousness. And for those of us who can't access a deeply altered state of consciousness by dancing around a fire for 24 hours, mind you, I don't know if I can or can't because I've never danced around a fire for 24 hours, but the plants are there. They're our allies. They are available to us to access those states if there's no other way for us to access them. And even if there is another way to access them, we should also consider the plants. They are there, they are our friends, they are our allies. Some people say, I've heard people despise the plants and say, oh, you should be able to reach your deeply altered state of consciousness by entirely natural means. Hang on, what's more natural than a plant? Really? I mean, we are creatures of this earth. The plants have co-evolved with us. Why would we regard meditation or the trance dance as a superior way of act? There's not a superior way. There is no superior or inferior. There is just generous nature, bountiful nature, which has equipped us with many ways to reach the states of consciousness that allow us to transcend and to understand what it is we're involved in here. The most important thing that we can teach our children is think for yourself. Never accept any idea off the peg. Just because it comes from a respected individual or Dr. X or Professor Y or a government figure or anybody. Just because it comes from Graham Hancock. Don't accept any ideas off the peg. Think for yourself. Work things out. That's what your brain is for. Use it. Get out there. Exercise it. Never react in an automatic, impulsive way, but think why you're reacting in the way you react. Often you'll find that institutions, organizations in our society are deliberately pressing buttons designed to provoke knee-jerk reactions. And the knee-jerk reaction is the last thing of being human. We have to react in a thought-out way and understand what we're doing. So the most important message for young people is think for yourselves, equip yourself with the tools to think for yourself. Never rely on any guru. Never put your trust in any individual who says that he or she knows how things are. Because nobody really knows how things are. We're all on our individual life journey. And we're not here to be meat robots doing the business of the state or the big corporations. We are here to have an experience that will have, I believe, a profound long-term effect beyond this life on ourselves and on the universe as a whole. It's a sacred purpose that we're here to fulfill. And we have been equipped with certain facilities, including intelligence, in order to fulfill that sacred purpose. Use it. Think for yourself. Be your own leader. You don't need leaders. Why do we need leaders? Why do we need to be led? I've heard some say, oh, well, most people need leaders. Why do most people need leaders? We all have these huge brains. We all have this heart and this soul. What do we need to be led for? And when we look at the work of leaders over the centuries, over the millennia, there's very little in it that's good. Most of it's bad and harmful. Most of it's about the ego of the leader. I think that we're coming to a time in the human story when we need to dispense with leadership. We need to realize that we are our own guides and our own leaders. And if we do that, then the future will be much brighter than if we stay locked in the old paradigm of top-down control, structure, hierarchy, leadership and gurus.
Yeah, in order to do that though, we need a global understanding of the ego.
A global understanding of the ego and yeah, personal understanding of the ego too.
Yeah. In a personal, individual way.
Yeah, we need that. We absolutely do. And our society constructed, as the Gnostics would have said, by demiurgic forces to shut us down, is not allowing that to happen at the moment. That's why we have to take that next step. You know, we have to detach ourselves from the existing order of things. The existing order of things is profoundly negative for the human spirit. There's nothing in it that's good, as far as I can see. It's all bad, and it comes first from saying, I am a free individual. I am here to learn. I am here on a sacred journey. Nobody should get in the way of that. Nobody should tell me how to run my journey. I should run my journey myself. How do music, dance, and festivities benefit human development? Well, unfortunately, music and dance and festivities at the moment are not being used with the intention of benefiting human development. They've fallen into the entertainment paradigm of the dominator system that we live in. While that is our intent, while our intent is simply to be entertained, nothing wrong with being entertained. It's great to be entertained. But if we want to make progress with this, then I think we need to have a more thought out intent from the experience that we're having. What I do see at festivals is a kind of microcosm of the whole human experience. We have beauty and truth in festivals. We have wonderful, nurturing individuals who are there for others, you know, and we have others who are pretty selfish and mean. I don't remember which festival it was I was at, but it was a very muddy one, and there was a muddy track that people were walking along, and it was on a hill, and up on the hill there were a whole lot of people sitting like in an audience. They were watching, and they were watching intently as the next person walked along. And sure enough, disguised by the mud and the water, the next person fell into a hole so deep that only his head was above the hole, filled with water and mud. And what did the audience do? They all laughed. Ah! They were entertained by this. Now, that's most unfortunate. What they should have been doing is saying, watch out, mate, there's a hole there that you're going to fall into. Nobody was saying that. So I'm afraid negative behavior occurs at festivals as well as positive behavior. But what I do see at festivals, whether it's Glastonbury, whether it's the Boom Festival, whether it's Burning Man, which I've attended and had extraordinary experiences there as well, is that some kind of new spirit is emerging. Some kind of creativity is being expressed. This is if you like, it's a temporary gathering of people who are brought together by a community of ideas, and that ultimately has got to be a good thing. It's got to be, and it is, a catalyst for change and for rethinking society. But we shouldn't think that just by coming to a festival we're going to be playing a part in that. We have to have intent. We have to live a conscious life at festivals and everywhere else.